everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of the US presidential election show. 22 days to go, just over 3 weeks, and it's great to have back on the show the in-house US politics expert at LP Brussels, Ryan Hunter. Welcome back, Ryan.
Thank you.
Well, it's certainly been a pretty dramatic week. You said what else could happen? What could possibly happen next? Well, Trump was diagnosed with COVID-19, and it would appear, according to him at least, he's staged a pretty miraculous recovery. What impact has that all had, Ryan, on the election campaign and in particular the polling?
Well, that's a great question because his diagnosis through the election really up in the air. An election that was already looking to be more fluid following the nomination of Coney Barrett. But this changed everything. Effectively, the campaigning slowed down almost to a halt as Trump went to Walter Reed Hospital. And thus ensued a weird episode of updates from his doctors that were then undermined by his own chief of staff, and then doctor apologizing for saying he wanted to create an optimistic environment around Trump's diagnosis. And it was a very strange few days. And, I would easily feel that some people didn't know what was right, what was wrong and what was truth in that. And all they saw was Trump going in the hospital, taking his almost parade in his car, and then going back to the White House. That's pretty much the 3 biggest episodes of this last few days.
And surprisingly, perhaps looking at the opinion polls, it's not really changed matters that much. I mean, if anything, some of them are suggesting there's perhaps a slight drift towards Joe Biden. But overall, given how dramatic the last few days have been, it's perhaps surprising, is it not, Ryan, that there's not been much change in voter preferences?
No, and absolutely. I mean, some people would have perhaps expected a bit of a sympathy boost for the president having been diagnosed with COVID, and certainly he's tried to really tap on that he's having now experienced COVID. He understands what it means for people and how you shouldn't be dominated by it. But what we've seen in the polls, as you say, is that Joe Biden's lead somehow keeps expanding. And we had some very big polls over the weekend, showing Joe Biden reaching as high as 54%. And some polls showing Trump even below 40%. Now, obviously, that is a very big difference in numbers, but it just shows that even in this very strange weekend where the president was in the hospital, Joe Biden's, even without really campaigning, managed to expand his lead.
Sure, and let's come on to the details of those polls, if we may, Ryan. They look overall very, very good for Biden, because you're the first to remind us that we shouldn't get too obsessed with the national poll. We should look at the key battleground states. And we're actually going to put up a graphic now, if we may, the 5 key states that you've identified for us, Ryan. Do you want to take us through the battleground and just explain on the ground what's actually happening in the battleground states? I mean, are we seeing a widening gap between Biden and Trump in the battleground states?
In some, yes. In Arizona, which is one of the battleground states where we've seen some of the biggest movement towards Biden, a state that Trump won in 2016, polls give Biden anywhere between a 5 to 8 point lead in Arizona, so outside the margin of error, which will be a big problem for the Trump campaign if the Democrats win that. But the headline really is, of all the battleground states, including the 5 we've mentioned, but if you even expand your horizon a bit to include states like Georgia and others like that, Trump is only ahead in 1 battleground state right now, and that's Georgia by 1 point, which is effectively a tie. It's in the margin of error. It could go either way. So the trend is not looking good right now for the Trump campaign. Now, of course, you have quite a few states that are within that single-digit lead mainly for Joe Biden, where you're in the margin of error, so we shouldn't count out Trump at all. But certainly looking at the trends, it's not looking good for the Trump campaign in those states.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll come back to that because, of course, that's the key focus, really, that will determine the outcome of this campaign, whether Trump can hold on to those battleground states. But as you say, it's not looking good. Of course, we almost forget now the other big development, which was the VP debate between Harris and Pence. Perhaps the most remarkable thing was that it was pretty unremarkable. But do you want to perhaps highlight anything that we could have learned from that in terms of the impact in terms of getting votes out on the day, or indeed in the run-up to the election, Ryan?
Yes. The debate was so unremarkable that the most remarkable thing that happened during the debate was a fly landing on Pence's head, which woke.
I almost forgot that, Ryan.
Which woke a lot of people up from a slumber that the debate would have put them in. It was a much more civilized debate than the Trump-Biden one, and I think Kamala Harris and Mike Pence, ran through the key points for their base. I would say Kamala Harris won the debate, perhaps edging out Mike Pence. Some polls had Kamala Harris winning by a bigger margin than others. I don't think it was an easy debate for her. I don't think she won by a big amount, but I think she probably did more to convince people of her and Joe Biden's platform and their ideas. And Mike Pence spent most of the debate sort of securing the conservative base that he and Trump, of course, they need. But in terms of convincing people who are not in that base or not in either party's base, I think that Kamala Harris did a better job overall. But I don't see this debate changing the current narrative of the race.
The VPs have always been quite remote, I guess, from determining the impact of the election. But I mean, would you say at all, in terms of their character, their charisma, their personalities, that Americans are warming to Harris or to Pence, or do you think these are rather cold, remote figures?
Well, CNN showed a poll that showed that Harris managed to increase her favorability rating over this debate. And on Mike Pence's side, his interrupting of Kamala Harris and the moderator, but also his very obvious pivoting away from questions did not come off very well. I think he mishandled the situation in that regard. He had a very clear plan. He is a good debater, someone hard to debate. He would debate you very politely normally. Just that in this case, I think he tried to show a bit more, and his interruption showed that, and I don't think it came off very well.
And just to be clear, Ryan, just to confirm, I believe there's no further VP debates in this election campaign, so that's done now.
Well, there may be no more debates. Period. Depends.
Okay. Would you like to update our viewers, Ryan, on what is the situation now with the debates? Are we going to have any more VP debates? And obviously, in particular, are we going to have any more presidential debates?
Well, that was the one and only VP debate of the whole cycle. We've also only had one Trump-Biden debate. There were supposed to be three. Trump's COVID diagnosis led the Commission on Debates to suggest that the second debate, which was supposed to be this week, take place virtually. Trump said no. He was pushing for an in-person debate. So, after a bit of back and forth, the commission just canceled the debate entirely, which leaves us with only one more debate planned, which is on October 22nd. Right now, we don't know if that will go ahead or not, and in what format, because this debate this week was supposed to be a town hall format, taking questions from voters directly. So I would say let's wait and see how this week shapes out to be. I would not be surprised if there's no more debates. Of course, as someone who enjoys watching them, I really hope they can find some agreement to keep it.
Okay, well, we don't want to tempt fate, but any more shocks on the horizon, Ryan? Any big events, any big milestones that could change the arithmetic in the next 22 days?
Well, starting today, you have the hearing of Amy Coney Barrett that starts in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, that will give a lot of people, some of whom are running, a chance to get more in the national spotlight. And that will once again put the Supreme Court issue front and center for at least this week, if not beyond. So I think that nomination process could make quite a few headlines the same way the Kavanaugh ones did before. So that for me is a major point which could still change the race and could still provide some shocks. Now, will she pass? Most likely. I don't think the Democrats can block her, but I think they can lay out their arguments and certainly paint a picture of what kind of nominee she is that would motivate Democratic voters to turn out more, and the Republicans can do the same, saying that we need to get her through, because otherwise Democrats, who may very well win majority in the Senate, are going to quote unquote pack the court, which is an argument that has really caught the attention in the Republican Party. Okay, and well, I'm sure we'll come back to that story, of course, next week, because this story will run and run. Of course, the hearings will dominate, as you say, the proceedings during the coming week. If we can now perhaps turn to one of the deep dives. I know a lot of our viewers really enjoy our deep dives into some of the issue stories that don't get into the headlines, and one of them obviously is environment policy and Biden, or indeed Trump's diverging views on climate change. And all of that and the impact on the emerging climate law here in Europe, the dramatic reduction required under the climate law, 55% reduction CO2 by 2030. What impact would a Biden victory have on Europe in terms of climate policy, both obviously in Europe and the US, but also globally? Well, that's an interesting question. I think to take it one step back, there was a lot of debate about, is Biden's position on climate change the Green New Deal? Is it the Biden plan? And what is the Biden plan? I think, firstly, the Green New Deal is a non-binding resolution that provides a framework for an aggressive attack on climate change, but also provides wide economic reforms that Joe Biden does not endorse. And so the Joe Biden plan, or the Biden plan, is a much more narrow, detailed plan to fight climate change. And it would put the US on more equal footing to the EU and what the EU Green Deal is trying to do. And I think a Joe Biden presidency, you would see some more moves like a higher carbon price, which is what the EU desperately wants to see around the world. And it's trying to push through that in its carbon border tax we are expecting next summer. So I think a Joe Biden presidency leads to more climate cooperation with the EU. A Trump presidency, as we've seen, a lot more friction, a lot more skeptical about the impact and who's causing climate change. So it's a question of cooperation versus more friction on that from the EU's perspective. And then it's very clear who they'd rather see as the next US president.
Well, thanks for that. And again, I'm sure that's an issue that will dominate our show in the remaining few weeks. Of course, at the end of the show, we always invite you, Ryan, as you know, to come off the fence. Tell us what you think. Who's going to win? I have to maintain my Joe Biden prediction, but this time adding a bit more reasons behind that, is in the sense that, you know, we've been through two debates: presidential debate, vice president debate, and nothing's changed. And also we've been through a Supreme Court nomination. We've also had Trump's COVID diagnosis, and neither of those things have really changed the state of the race. And also we see the Trump campaign pulling ad buys in key states, which tells me that they also starting to see issues with their campaigning. So I don't see any reason to change that prediction, in my opinion. Okay, well, as always, Ryan, we appreciate you coming off the fence and giving us your firm prediction for
way off the fence.
Can I thank our viewers once again for tuning into our weekly US presidential election show? Can I invite them to like, to share, to comment, tell us what you think, and do table questions that I can put to Ryan and our other special guests. Don't forget to subscribe, ring that notification bell, of course. And in particular, can I thank Ryan for joining us once again on the show, sharing with us your wisdom, your insight, and I hope you can join us again next week. Thank you very much, everyone.